Welcome to Dr Akmal YouTube channel, and this is the fourth episode discussing psychological issues and the coronavirus and the impacts of isolation and all the new policies. Thank you for joining us again. Last time we touched upon the mental health in a more broad element. You talked about anxiety, about how to deal with living in close quarters with people that we may have not been living with, the fear of going outside. But today, let's focus on the psychological impacts of isolation or the feeling of isolation. As you mentioned, social isolation in the previous video. Some people may not have access, some people may not want to. How are they coping, and what is the psychology behind that? Any tools or advice you can offer them?
Now, we may be talking of a particular set of people who do not have access to social media. We may be looking at those people who are very elderly. And I think that that is a real challenge. People who are the more introvert types, for them that is not going to be so traumatic. So the idea that isolation is invariably a traumatizing experience is not valid.
Right.
It all depends on what kind of personality you are. The extroverts are the ones who will feel suffocated, the ones who must socialize, those people who have to interact,
Me.
those who feel compelled to interact. But there are people who enjoy their own company.
Right.
There are people who are, as I said, introverts. Those are people who love books. They may want to just spend time. There are some people who want to just do meditation, a view of their internal self. So I think that there are lots of options available to people that they can look at life in a different manner.
Right.
So they can look at that they have a 2-month, 3-month opportunity of being able to look after and look into themselves. That may make them a stronger human being. They may become more self-aware. They may become more self-reflective.
Mm-hmm. And those that are getting frustrated, it's very easy to about sitting home, reflecting on oneself or trying to indulge one's hobbies. That isn't the easiest thing to do at times. So
For some people.
For some people, exactly. So what advice could you offer them, as an expert in psychology and psychiatry, to make the most out of this time? How can they become more reflective? How can they find the peace that they are searching for in this panic?
I think that that may be an issue for a group of people. It is not a valid presupposition that it is applicable on everybody.
So you think most people are able to reflect and enjoy the time alone?
I think a large number of people should be able to. There is another large number of people who may not be able to, but they will have to. So if it is fait accompli, this is what is going to happen, then I think that it is time for people to start looking at how they will have a self-nurturing time, how they will have a time spent which is more reflective, more enriching, more empowering. How can they do that? They can, as I suggested, meditation. Right. Depending on their belief systems, it can go into some form of spiritual self-exploration.
Right.
It can people can look at some religious rituals.
Right.
People can look at, there are so many interesting rituals within Christianity, within Judaism, within Islam, where people can isolate themselves, people can do so much.
Buddhism
itself, yes, and meditation, and in Hinduism as well, various forms of meditation, yoga, etc. So I feel that there are lots of things that people can do, and in England and in Europe, the whole world is open because West has embraced all these cultures and all these habits. So they can, in England, we can look at all that, and maybe this is what we should. And for the first time, I feel here is another opportunity for television, media, mobile phone, internet to become a real teacher. So far, it has primarily been a source of entertainment, fake news and news, building up ideas or political scenario and pitching it in a particular manner. Maybe this is time that people can take control of the social media and media in general.
Absolutely.
And make it relevant to how they will live with it in a bilateral manner in this new world where they have to live on their own.
Absolutely, because you mentioned that in the last video episode as well about the role of the media, how that is what it's there for. It's majority of it's private and it's there for ratings. But now, okay, so then this concept of extreme isolation, it's invalid because we live, like as you mentioned in the last video, we live in a time of social media. So it's not exactly isolation as maybe we would have had to do 100 years ago.
Yeah. Total isolation is feared for the very elderly who are living on their own. And then that is what is up to now the local councils in England to identify.
How would you advise them to do it in countries like Pakistan?
Well,
because in England, like you said, we have systems.
Yeah, there is the governments in countries like Pakistan, India, other Asian countries which aren't so organized and so educated. It is not possible. The only way it can happen is for the neighbor to do it. So here is the time of being the real neighbor. And I don't think that this will be an issue in a village. I do not, in a Pakistani village or in a Pakistani town, a small town, but I think it will be an issue in a large city where people may have migrated far, far away from their original places of birth.
Right.
And there is not a social support network.
Great. And sorry, I interrupted you before. Let's bring it back to you talking about in England, local councils can get involved. Who else? The panic.
Charities can get involved. General practitioners can get involved because who has this particular information? Your GP has the list of registered people over 60.
True.
You have your local council because, an elderly person doesn't pay his council tax bill. There's a warrant of his arrest or, summons from the court within weeks. So if, the council is so efficient, let those computers now start working and saying, okay, do you need money? Do you need food? Do you need some company?
Absolutely.
Do you want us to provide you with a laptop or a computer in which you can have a conversation?
That's a wonderful idea. Okay, so now let's bring it back. We can comment on the policies like you said in the last one, but let's focus on the psychology. Some people feel that a lot of positives can come out of this.
Yes.
However, I feel like maybe I'm reading too much fatalistic type of news, or that's what I'm being exposed to compared to what you're exposing yourself to. So do you think that this panic that people are feeling as young people, maybe we're carriers and maybe we'll infect people that we love, we don't really know if it, can have detrimental effects on young children, although they're carriers too, we haven't seen as many cases. This panic and fear in our minds, as you mentioned in the previous episode, we don't have all the information. How do we manage that?
Okay. I think there are two approaches here.
I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but, I think we need... That's
an issue and it's a recurring theme. I feel that the first is that we constantly need to make ourselves aware of what is going on the positive side and on the negative side. We're looking at the negative, but have we looked at the positive? China, in Wuhan, where it all apparently started, have been reporting 0 cases. Okay? Now, they've done it. Some say that the Chinese are saying that it was the disposable gloves and the masks that did it. And some say it is other holistic
Exactly.
things that they did, which only China could do. And that's what I would say a superpower looks like in terms of what China has achieved. That within weeks it has curtailed a pandemic. Now, that's a positive thing. So you have a success role model available. How you can there import that experience? You are importing Chinese goods. Now let's get some Chinese experience imported as well, and how we then adapt it to our British culture. So certain steps may not be possible in Britain that they say China may have taken because of its organization and its form of government. But after all, it has saved a huge faction of humanity as a result of that. So if they have saved humanity, and they would have devastated humanity had they not done what they did, then of course, overall, in the longer term, that's a success. They have allowed other generations of those who are now living to be able to have a fruitful life.
So how is that supposed to give peace to people who are not in China? So because
I think that, as I said, knowledge, learning. So they should look at it and they should see what did the Chinese do themselves. So it wasn't only the doctors and the nurses. It wasn't only the police and the government and the law enforcement agencies. It wasn't only the Communist Party of China. It was the people of China who did it. It was the people of Wuhan who did it. If 20 million or 200 million people of Wuhan had decided that they didn't want to abide by what the doctor was saying, how could they have done that?
Okay, so I mean, we know it's very serious. It's having an impact on everyone. And this is what we're focusing on, this the long-term psychological impacts. But when you see, a few weeks ago, I was able to fly out of the country and come back without anyone stopping me or asking where I'd been. We've seen multiple videos of Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Birmingham. No one's checking anything. So, I mean, how are you supposed to get any psychological
But
peace?
that would not be
on
the
anxiety?
case now. I think that what's happened is that gradually, the way it has grown slowly and it has increased in numbers slowly, and more fear has set in slowly, it would be reflective in our videos. The attitude we had about this particular thing in the first video to the second video and to now, the attitudes are different. It was more relaxed. There was more I would say, approach was more cautious. But now it isn't cautious. It is clear that it is a huge risk. We are not being cautious about our approach, whether it's right or wrong. There is only one approach. You have to be extremely careful about it. Otherwise, it's going to kill hundreds and thousands of people.
Okay, another psychological impact it has is that some people are starting to play the blame game. You've mentioned this before a couple of times in the previous videos, that if this is the approach we're taking, then we're not really taking any lessons that we're supposed to from this this event. Why is it a knee-jerk reaction to find a scapegoat?
Okay. Because that is the easiest way of parking all your anger.
Okay, does it actually bring any genuine comfort to the
It
individual?
doesn't. No, it doesn't, because you also know that you're wrong. So
We
there
do?
is, yeah, absolutely. The thing is that, I will take this parallel of racism.
Okay.
Okay, now that's a very ruthless virus itself that kills people. The thing is that in the Nazis thought that all ills of society because of one particular faction. And we have to eliminate that particular faction.
Right.
And all ills will be gone. And that is how this mentality works. And this mentality is there in virtually all societies. And they look at, in certain societies, it's a different target, and other societies, it's a different one. In Pakistan, it is a political blame game. One party is blaming another party, the other party is blaming another party, and it is individuals and leaders being blamed. And one is saying, I'm warning you, do this. The other is saying, I'm warning you, do that. One is saying, don't do this, do that. Now, that is where in England, we are also seeing that it is now, there is this fear. Fear generates a desire to understand what is going on. That generates anger as well. Okay? And then that anger and that fear has to be parked somewhere. Somebody has to be made responsible for it. In Pakistan, it's the politicians who are being blamed. And now certain religious factions are being blamed.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. So I think that whereas the facts are against that, but it is easy to do it. Similarly here, there is this gradual discussion in England being now brewed by, once again, commercialized media.
They're giving a platform to it.
And the blame game has already started, that you should have done this, why didn't you do that, and so on.
And some people have even started bringing China into it. And actually, from what I've seen, the public have actually been like, this is not the time to do this. So it's almost like people are goading people into disliking and blaming someone.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true? That can we be led so easily?
We have been led. History suggests that in times of existential threat, sensible people can become murderous thugs. Professors have been involved in, and humanitarians have transformed into violent people, because when you yourself are under threat and your own existence is apparently under threat, and somebody takes you to one direction, and when you're confused about the multitude of factors around you, and your brain wants simplicity, clarity, and whether it false or true, any form of clarity is sufficient, and then people start on it. And if you're ignorant, if you're not able to reflect, then you will follow the sensationalism.
Okay, let's see how that turns out. I think it's still too early to say if that's having...
It is too early to say, and this is what I'm saying, that either European societies, and here is a little bit of a warning that I feel that I must give. History of European societies in dealing with scapegoats is not very good. European societies, whether within Europe or without during colonial times, have dealt with the other, the blamable, the weaker, in a not kind manner.
Don't all societies do that?
Well, maybe, but I'm talking more of the last 100 years.
Yeah, okay.
So what I would say is, being in Europe, talking about more in this particular manner.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that here, the civilized Europe is now coming under severe existential, potentially mortal for a lot of people, and financial threat. How then it comes out? Will the extremist psyche emerge as a result? Will the nationalist socialists and such, the extreme right wings will rise as a result? Or will the humanity of Europe, which it has learned in the last 60, 70 years after the Second World War, and created a more successful model of living, survive? That is where, And it all depends how deeply does this virus attack. If the virus attack is stopped here, I feel that that dichotomy, that challenge may not be so frontal. But if it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4 months, when economies are devastated, when the coffers are exhausted, when the food stuff is not
Actually,
there,
yeah.
that's where the reality of humanity will appear.
Great. And on that, I don't know if that's a very positive note to end on. Should we end up on a positive?
I think it's a reflective note, as people should reflect.
Okay.
In these few months, they should reflect. What are they going to be? Are they going to be the ones attacking their neighbor and eating their dog? Or are they going to be the humane ones who will be sharing the small piece of bread, half to the neighbor, half for yourself?
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for your time, and we will be back soon with another video on how to cope with the crisis. Thank you.